All right, so this is our presentation on mindful eating. And if you are here live, feel free to ask questions in the chat box as we go. I'm going to try to leave a little bit of time at the end for questions too. But if you are watching this on the replay, like a lot of you often do, feel free to email me or send me a DM or anything on Facebook if you have questions about this after the fact as well. So it's been a little while since I've done a presentation on mindful eating. I think the last time I did it, it was for my group specifically, but this one's just kind of open to everybody here. But the reason I do this one is because there's so much, there's just not a lot of information really out there about mindful eating. I mean, there is, but there's not a whole lot of specifics for how to take action on it. Just defining what it is for a lot of people can be sort of vague. And really the big question is, how can this help us to lose weight? Can it or not? And what are the limitations? So we're going to talk about all of that today and really figure out how we can use this as a tool rather than have it just be our current strategy, our only strategy, if weight loss is what you're aiming for. So I know a lot of you on the registration list already, but if you are new to the group, I did see a couple new names on there as well. My name is Jackie Durand. I'm a registered dietitian. I own JD Nutrition LLC, based out of Colchester, Connecticut, but everything I do is actually virtual. So I've been a dietitian for, I got to change that, about 7 years now. And I primarily coach for weight loss, but I also do medical nutrition therapy as well. So diet changes for things like high cholesterol, blood pressure, diabetes, that kind of stuff as well. But really my passion is really helping people with weight loss because I do have a personal history with it. Long-standing one that is, has used mindful eating at certain times and then other times not as well. So just so you know a little bit about where I'm coming from. Oh, definitely need to update this now. My daughter is now going into kindergarten, so I have a 5-year-old. We like to do a lot of yard work and stuff around the house, gardening, that kind of stuff. And I do like staying fit and active and all of that kind of stuff, which is not always the case. That wasn't always the case in a former version of myself. So and that's a little bit about me. But now let's turn the conversation a little bit into taking some inventory of your mindfulness. So just thinking about when you last ate today, right? What was your last meal? Where did you eat it? Do you feel like you were present with the food? You were actually enjoying it and thinking about what it was? Or do you feel like you were distracted by other things? So I'll give you a second to think about that. And if you want to share, feel free to put it in the chat. You're welcome to. And now when I ask this question, a lot of times people will say, I just sort of like ate nothing yet today, which it's noontime. So that's problematic. Or just like mindlessly kind of grazing on snacks and things that are available, generally speaking. So the average person isn't being 100% mindful most of the time. And that's really what we're aiming to reduce here today. So being mindful is a very subjective sort of thing, right? What is it exactly to be mindful? There's no real rules. It's sort of vague as a definition in there. And that's really just one big pitfall of using mindful eating as a tool, especially when it comes to weight loss, right? So, if you're, you need some sort of specific plan in order to be successful with that, to maintain this weight loss pattern pretty consistently. So when you use something as sort of flighty as mindful eating is, that can really get you in trouble. But it actually makes more sense to explain what mindful eating is by explaining what it isn't, right? So the biggest thing with mindless eating is this distraction that we talk about. So we're all guilty of this at times. You're eating while you're working, while you're watching TV, watching a movie and eating popcorn. That is a mindless act, right? We're scrolling on our phones, we're reading, we're doing all sorts of other things usually, especially throughout the day when you're eating lunch, you're at work, you're snacking on things during the day. But that's also including things like emotional eating too. So we're going to talk a lot about that today as well. But basically, it's making food decisions and deciding to eat based on something that is going on emotionally. So you're stressed, you're anxious, you're bored, all of the above. And it becomes a decision based on emotion versus how you're actually feeling physically and what your body actually needs in that moment, right? External eating is another one. So a lot of people get triggered just by, like driving by a fast food restaurant and smelling it, or just seeing the sign, things like that. And so if that's triggering eating for you, that can be another one. Rushed eating sort of goes along with that distracted eating. So if you get like 5 minutes to eat lunch because you got 1,000 other things to do, rushed eating usually means that you're not taking the time to understand how full you're getting. You're really just eating what is there, regardless of how much it is, how much is going to fill you or stuff you in some reasons as well. Binge eating goes along with that as well. So this is basically eating to over fullness, eating when you're not hungry, and basically ignoring your hunger signals in general. So that is basically what mindful eating is not. So let's define it a little bit here. So mindful eating is simply just eating with more awareness, and it's paying very close attention, not only to what you're eating, but how that sensation is in your, not only in your mouth, but as it's going into your stomach, and you're paying attention to how full you are at the beginning of the meal, during the meal, at the end of the meal, and all of these things. And you're really eating based on your physical hunger, and you're stopping when you're full. You're not taking extra bites just because it tastes good, all of these other things. Which of course, like I said, this is all very subjective stuff. So how can we do this in a meaningful way that can actually help us with weight loss? So we're going to find out why this is so important to begin with just here in a second. But I don't know if you guys have seen lately, there's been a lot of information, a lot of literature coming out about mindful eating, and it's really just sort of being renowned as this perfect diet, like the solution for your weight loss issues and all of that stuff. I do recommend, there is a book called Intuitive Eating. It's by a pair of dietitians, Evelyn Tribal and Elise Resch. That one you can find on Amazon pretty easy. And what they do is they teach some different principles of mindful eating to their clients. So I did find a lot of practical advice in that book, some of that you will see here as well. But even these women who are promoting mindful eating do note its limitations in there as well. And they're saying, it's not necessarily the magic bullet for weight loss, because if you're eating based on the signals that your body is giving you for hunger and for fullness, the goal of your body is to maintain your weight, right? So survival mechanisms take over. Your body does not want to rid itself of these extra body stores, your fat, because it's considered a good thing, right? That means, if you were in a famine situation, if you were in some sort of survival situation, you'd last longer if you had more body fat, right? Because you have more energy to be burning off in an emergency situation. So if you can understand that, that's where your body is coming from. You can see why it's so hard to lose weight, right? But so if you're following this idea of mindful eating as a means to lose weight, it's problematic because you're not going to be eating in a calorie deficit, which you do need in order to make sure that you're burning off the body fat. You're just going to be eating to maintain, which for many people can really be helpful, right? So if you've been in this, this situation where you're gaining weight, slowly creeping up, could be coming on fast, doesn't really matter. But if you're in a place where you're gaining, mindful eating can be a really good tool to stop that gain from happening and just keep you maintaining. And that will at least give you a little bit of time to figure out how to be in a calorie deficit so that you are more comfortable and you can come up with a good plan for that, right? So is it the perfect diet? No, it's not a diet at all. Okay. It's really just it's helping to maintain weight, get you better connected with what is going on within your body, this hunger and this fullness system that we're all basically ignoring here. And so we want to make sure that this is not the only thing, the only tool that we're using in this process as well. Okay. But there are some other benefits. So let's talk a little bit about that. Okay. If you guys have any questions as we go, feel free to put them in the chat. All right. So let's talk about number one. So one of the biggest things I see when I have a client that comes to me saying they've been diagnosed with IBS. IBS is one of those diagnoses that the doctors basically give you if they can't quite pinpoint anything major going on. You don't have like a food allergy or a sensitivity or anything like that. So it can really be just a cluster of symptoms that they're not really pairing to anything. So things like gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, and kind of going back and forth between all of those things, just digestive irregularity. Okay. So one problem with that, and I'd say probably about 50% of the IBS clients that I do see benefit from mindful eating because they're actually triggering early digestion. So one of the first things that happens, and as we talk about this, it may be happening to you, as soon as you start thinking about eating, thinking about food, if you're triggered by food, something sparks this idea of eating, the first thing that happens is you get saliva in your mouth, right? So that is step one of digestion. So your body is preparing itself for food to enter. So saliva is happening. You're actually getting some gastric juices flowing in there before you're even eating. You're just thinking about eating. And that is to prepare for best digestion. So the enzymes that are coming out are meant to break down the food very easily, very quickly, so that it can get where it needs to be. Okay. So if you're mindlessly eating, you're skipping this process, you're flooding your system with food that it wasn't ready for. And this is where the problems happen. Your digestion isn't happening as quickly. If you're eating too much and you're eating too fast in that situation too, it just becomes an overload on the system. And so, yes, these problems are going to happen, right? Most of us have seen, what was that show? Oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking now. The red-haired lady from back in the 60s, and they have that, oh my gosh, what is her name? Someone knows it. Please tell me what it is. They have this assembly line thing, and they're trying to like test the chocolates or something like that. Danielle, what did you say?
I Love Lucy.
Yes, thank you. So they're on this assembly line. It's her and her friend, is it Ethel or something? And they're trying to keep up with this assembly line. They just end up just eating all the chocolates because they can't keep up with it. So that's essentially what is happening in your digestive tract when you're not preparing it and you're eating too fast, you're eating too much all at the same time. It's very likely that you can experience these symptoms. And even if you've eaten like that once or twice, you don't have IBS, you probably experience this too. So one thing that we do work on with those clients specifically, but really for everybody, is just slowing that down, being more mindful of what is happening, so that you can bypass these known causes and start feeling better here as well. So if this is anything that you've ever experienced and would like to avoid, again, just know that digestion is almost half as effective when you're mindlessly eating as well. So that is number one. All right, number two, the problem here is, you've got these foods coming in and relatively mindlessly, right? You're not necessarily choosing what they are. So if you're just grazing through the break room and there's cookies on the counter or something like that, if you're mindlessly grabbing them, you're not thinking about balanced food decisions, most likely, right? So things that you can do are really just deciding, number one, if it's even worth it, right? Having a cookie, like, unless it's your absolute favorite cookie, maybe it's not even that good. The taste may not even be worth it in those cases as well. We can also balance these things a little bit better if we are thinking about this too. So maybe there's a little box of cookies, but there's also a fruit platter in there as well. If you're taking the time and just being more mindful for 10 or 15 seconds just to see what your options are and really think it through, it can help you to balance those things. So maybe you have like a small bit of the cookie or just one, depending on how many you usually take, and then you balance that out with some sort of fruit to go with it, right? That makes you a balanced decision. It gives you a little bit more in terms of nutrients, so vitamins and minerals, got some extra fiber in there. Maybe the cookie does really taste good and you're still allowed to have it, but you're making it in a more balanced way. You're not just filling up on cookies, you're getting all of this other stuff that you need to. So I think the pitfall here is that there are no specific rules for mindful eating. So the quality of your diet might improve a little bit. You may be able to navigate situations like the cookies and the fruit, for example, which is great, but it still may not put you in a calorie deficit to lose weight, at least not on a consistent basis, right? So you're making this good choice, but it's not getting you where you need to be in terms of that weight loss. And truthfully, there is a lot more to know. Nutrition isn't just balancing out your cookies with fruit. There's so much more to it. So it's important to have a really good base of this nutrition education to help understand what your body needs in terms of nutrients. And if you can look at it from this perspective of, okay, I know I need to be getting some protein in. I know I need this many fruits and veggies in my diet. And I know I haven't gotten those today. It just helps you make some more educated decisions, helps you just to steer in different directions when you are being mindful as well. And I think it's really important too, just to kind of experiment with different ways of eating, get different perspectives on that as well, because you don't know what the best option for you is until you've tried a lot of different things. And so one of the things that we work on in my program, we integrate this mindfulness as we implement some more structured meal plans and ideas and things like that. So we can make sure that not only a calorie deficit is being achieved, but we're doing so in a way that you're not missing out on nutrients. I think a big mistake that a lot of dieters make is just thinking like it's only calories in, calories out. But if you're eating less, that's less opportunities for you to be getting in the amount of protein that you need, the amount of fiber, key nutrients that you may be missing, especially if you're eliminating food groups in that process as well. And so we work on this to make sure that you are getting that balance, that you're mindful and you're making sure you're finding and identifying along the way what foods feel most filling to you and which ones don't, right? So I can give a client like a full meal plan, right? And certain meals will just not feel filling and not feel satisfying to them. And it will actually show in their food logs and everything. They ate more later in the day because whatever they had for lunch wasn't satisfying, right? And so if we can be mindful of those things and kind of pick and choose based on what made them feel the best, what gave them the most energy, what was emotionally satisfying as well. Things that taste good are important too. That's really where that mindfulness can take hold and actually be very useful in those cases. Let's see. All right, number 3. Big fact here. Mindless eating disconnects us from feelings of hunger and satiety. I see it all the time. I can't tell you how many women come to me telling me that they just aren't hungry and so they just don't eat, right? And to that I say, well, you may have been trained to ignore your hunger. That's definitely true. I do feel like 50% of the people that come to me experience under eating more than blatant overeating. It's usually pretty obvious if someone is just eating too much, they can kind of see that, but it's a little bit trickier when it isn't so obvious why weight gain is occurring or why weight loss is not happening in there. So here's the pattern that I see. The problem with under eating is that it's not consistent, right? So a person could not eat all day saying, oh, they're not hungry, or I didn't have time to think about it. I just, I was going about my day and all these other things. And that maybe can occur for the entirety of the day or even for a few days in a row, depending on what's going on. But when they do get hungry, they overcompensate and they justify it, right? And it seems pretty logical, right? Okay, well, I haven't really eaten a lot in the last few days, so it's fine that I'm eating this now, right? Except if you were to look at the numbers behind that, which I do, what you see is that they're averaging an amount of calories, depending on, it doesn't matter when they're getting it in, that would actually put them in a weight gain state, okay? And so this overcompensation and then this mindset of feeling like you can just eat whatever you want because you didn't eat all day, that a lot of times leads to the overeating and then the initial weight gain as well. So a big part of reconnecting to hunger is just simply being present, recognizing it and acting on it when you get to that as well. And for a lot of people, this may seem counterintuitive, right? Maybe it seems like a good thing to not be eating all day. Less has to be better for weight loss, right? That's certainly the case. But I actually had a woman who graduated my 12-week program 3 or 4 weeks ago. And she started the program. She was doing really good with exercise, but she was in this traditional eating nothing scenario, right? So she struggled initially to understand why I was telling her to eat more. There was a couple weeks there where she just was like holding steadfast to this idea that less is more. Because that's a learned thing. She spent 30 years trying to diet, right? And that's just something that she had to let go of. But what she did is she just dove in. She trusted the process. She ate more. She noticed she started having a lot more energy for the activities that she was doing, and the weight was coming off. And what would happen is, as she was tracking her food intake, she would notice that the weight loss would stall if she had a few days where things got really busy and she kind of fell back into that old not eating pattern. So it became very night and day for her as she was really looking at the information and looking at the data in front of her in that too. So let's talk a little bit about hunger signals. So these first two, empty stomach, thinking about food, stomach growling, those are pretty common ones that we associate with hunger. Those are actually late stages of hunger, right? And so the first few things that you actually see are little dips in energy. So a lot of us get that 2 o'clock or so dip in energy where you just feel like you either need a coffee or a nap. Maybe you're feeling a little bit less focused on what you're doing. You may be a little bit irritable or short with people. So those are all signs that your blood sugar is dipping a little bit and you're starting to get hungry, okay? But what we have that is sort of opposite of this is we're taught that lunchtime happens at lunchtime. These are your designated times to eat. We're really taught that from an early age. Just thinking about like grade school, you had lunch at this specific time, you had snack time here and all of these other things. And there wasn't a lot of flexibility to eat when we were hungry, right? And so essentially we've been trained from an early age to offset some of these hunger and to not recognize it so that we're not feeling hungry, right? So if you feel like you've kind of lost touch with your hunger, if you have this experience of not really feeling hungry for too long, here's a hint. You may start seeing these early signs of hunger as early as 2 hours after a meal. And if you're eating really balanced meals, it should be about 3 to 4 hours in between that you'll start experiencing this. So even if your diet is perfectly planned and all of these things, if you have these big gaps in your plan, like let's say between breakfast and lunch, there's a really long time in between, plan to have something at those 3 to 4 hour intervals. And as you start getting back into a routine to get back into this 3 to 4 hours, you'll actually start experiencing more recognition of hunger. I don't want to say there's going to be more hunger. I think you're just going to be more aware of those smaller dips that you're seeing at these intervals as well. A wonderful thing too that happens if you're doing this, that 2 o'clock crash feeling, I used to get that all the time. If you're eating well and you're eating every 3 to 4 hours, that essentially goes away. So it makes it just much more easy to get through the day in those situations too. So a lot to unpack there, but try the 3 to 4 hour thing if you are experiencing these days where you're not feeling hungry. Even just putting something small, like a small snack in there just to fill the space, can help you to start regulating that and to start recognizing it a little bit sooner. All right, and number 4, this is really what people associate mindful eating with, and that is helping us to identify emotional eating, right? So here's the fact. We all emotionally eat. It's nothing to be ashamed of or to feel guilty about. It's absolutely human nature, and every culture across the entire world has their version. So we cannot say this is just an American thing to be emotionally eating. Certainly not, right? So think about it. We celebrate birthdays with cake. We do turkey on Thanksgiving. We have burgers and dogs for the 4th of July. Does our body need cake? Do we need to have a hot dog? Do we need turkey on Thanksgiving? Physically speaking, no, right? Does it have to be any of these things? No, but these are choices that are made from emotion. These are nostalgia. These are repeating happy memories, and it's about celebration and all of that. And that is something that we need to consider within our food choices too, is it's not only about what we need physically, it is this emotional stuff wrapped in here. Okay. And there's no harm in that, right? I will be having a hamburger on 4th of July. It's just what we do, right? But for a lot of people, eating decisions become very highly based in emotion and less so on physical need. And that shift is really what can get them in trouble, right? So when it starts to go beyond like the normal cultural celebrations and things like that, and it's like every time you have a bad day at work, you treat yourself to something, you're tired from a long day, so you reward yourself with taking takeout. Anytime you're stressed, you're anxious, you're bored, you're reaching for a piece of chocolate, that kind of stuff. If the food is there to help soothe and comfort us more than anything in these uncomfortable moments, that may be the shift of that is getting you into trouble, right? So either keeping you from losing weight or keeping you in a steady gain situation as well. So when you're out of check, these habits can lead to weight gain. And with my clients, a really familiar pattern arises. If you've ever dieted, you've probably seen this happen once or twice. So you end up doing really well for a while, kind of running on high motivation. You really just want to lose the weight. You're really motivated and you feel like this time around, it's going to be different. Everybody says that, right? And you enjoy some weight loss and all of that. But at some point, inevitably, that high wears off a little bit. Something stressful comes up. It becomes more of a chore to think about food and cook for yourself and make sure you're getting in the exercise. And all of those decisions just start to feel hard, right? Everybody goes through that, right? And so they fall back into these comfort-based decisions, right? Because when things feel hard mentally to us, our initial reaction is to soothe that uncomfortable feeling. And how do we do that? With food, right? And by sitting around and not exercising and doing all these things. And it becomes this very simple night and day flip-flop for people in a lot of those cases, right? And eventually they get frustrated because yes, they're not doing the things that are keeping the weight off. And so the weight comes right back, right? So here's my advice for this one. It's something I have to remind myself of as well. Everybody goes through this, I'd say. It's this idea of just getting used to being uncomfortable. It's going to happen. It's okay to feel stressed. It's okay to feel anxious. It's okay to feel sad. These emotions are there to help us make moves, right? So if you're uncomfortable, this is your body's way of saying, something is not right. You're feeling too stressed. You're feeling too sad, whatever is happening there. It's really to push you out of those situations. So you're feeling uncomfortable enough to take action, right? And we need these emotions. We need to feel these emotions instead of trying to escape them into comfort, if that makes sense. So we have to remember it's okay to be uncomfortable. Food does not solve problems. Eating to soothe feelings is actually a form of procrastination that I'd say I experience a lot. You probably experience a lot as well. And it does nothing to actually help you get the work done in these cases, right? It doesn't help you deal with the underlying issue that is causing you to feel that way. So, in my opinion, it isn't really possible to eliminate emotional eating altogether because we all have these connections emotionally with food. But I do have a technique to help you add more logic into this so that you're not purely acting on your emotional impulses when it comes to food. So the first step in this process is finding a way to catch yourself in the act of mindless eating, which is a job in itself, right? Because if you're being mindless in eating, you're probably not thinking about your mindless eating in there as well. But if you can catch yourself in it and you see yourself doing it, and I will say, after lunch, I mindlessly ate a cookie and I knew I was doing it. I just grabbed it and I said, I know I'm going to want this. So I grabbed it. And I didn't stop myself. But if you can stop yourself in that situation and just sit with whatever uncomfortable feeling you're having in that moment, count to 10 and just allow it to be for 10 seconds, right? Just sit with that uncomfortable emotion. Take a second to identify it. This is a really powerful tool here. Literally name what it is that you're feeling. So for me, a lot of times it's like feeling anxious about something that is going to be happening, like a meeting that I'm going to be having or something like that. And so it could be easy just to like eat cookies until the meeting time comes, and then that's that. Or I can sit with it and say, I'm feeling anxious. And that naturally leads to identifying why and kind of pinpointing that kind of stuff as well. But I think just being able to identify that can be really helpful into figuring out what the next step is. And that is asking yourself, am I actually hungry? Am I really hungry here physically? Right. Some other things that may resonate with you too. Am I eating food just because it's here? Cookies downstairs. That was yes, because it was just there. If you're craving a specific food, this is often a signal that you are emotionally eating as well. So if you're just so physically hungry that even like broccoli looks good to you, that's probably a good sign that you're physically hungry. But if you're seeking out something very specific, like you have to go to Dunkin' Donuts and get this specific donut, it's because the emotional payoff of that is what you're aiming for. It is not physical calories, it's not nutrition, it is simply emotional. So that's a good one too. If you are craving something specific, that's a good signal. And then if you still aren't sure, it's okay. If you don't know, if you're just somewhere between the yes and the no, not really sure, it's okay if you choose to eat the food, but make sure that you're being mindful while you're doing it. So I'll point myself out, put myself up on the cross here. I ate that cookie mindlessly as I walked up the stairs to my office, right? Should I have been more mindful and actually remembered eating that cookie? Yes, I should have. But don't beat yourself up over stuff like that. But if you can make the choice, if you are going to eat in those moments and you're really unsure whether your decision is sound, just try to be more mindful and actually enjoy and pay attention to how hungry you're feeling after even just the first couple of bites. Because especially if it is emotional, maybe one or two bites of that cookie would have soothed you enough to realize, okay, I'm not physically hungry. Like I can let the rest of this cookie go, right? And I think food logging really helps with this as well, because it's a very logical thing to be doing. So writing down the things that you're eating is a step in mindfulness right there. Just being aware of what you're eating to write it down is an act of mindfulness. And then if you can add the extra layer of saying, okay, I had a cookie, I did so mindlessly, but I was stressed about whatever, then it helps you make those connections. And then you can build those patterns and start to catch yourself in those moments a little bit more often going forward too. All right. So more on this here too. So just to add another level of confusion into this mix. So if you struggle answering the am I hungry question and you're somewhere between yes and no, we have to remember that it's important to rule out physical hunger. And this is always going to be a moving target. Okay. So things that affect your hunger level day to day that we can sort of pinpoint are listed off here. So if you're feeling a lot more active, you're doing a lot more intense exercise, naturally you're going to be feeling a little bit more hungry. On the flip side of that, if you're more active, but it's not intense, you may actually feel less hungry in those cases too. So again, just adding more confusion to this too. Nutrient balance. If you are low on protein, if you're not getting any fiber in your diet, your body is going to be processing that energy very quickly, and you're going to be feeling more hungry more often during the day. So this is really where knowing what to eat, how to balance it on your plate, and how often to eat comes into play here. That's a really important thing that we work on in the program. Hydration levels. So many people are mistaking thirst for hunger signals. And so one good thing that you can do is if you're feeling hungry, you're not really sure, you can't answer this question, get yourself a big glass of water, aim to finish that, because that may be enough just to get you emotionally, like the oral fixation of having something. You may be topping off hydration stores and quenching that thirst as well. And that may help you make a different decision 15 minutes later when you actually finish that. Anytime you're stressed, your cortisol hormones peak, and this can affect your hunger levels. It can make you feel almost famished during the day at times. Illness can have the opposite effect. And then on the backside of illness, you may feel a lot more hungry because you're making up for lost time. All of these different things. Blood sugar is something that you can't really monitor unless you are checking your sugars on a regular basis. But we know that if your blood sugar is not, if it's not following a steady pattern because you're eating imbalanced, it's going to be causing these bigger hunger cravings and these bigger hunger spikes as well. Okay. So if you can rule out any of these things, and this is something that I'm working with the ladies in my program on too, is kind of identifying when this stuff is happening. This is going to help you remove some of the guilt around emotional eating, because if you're kind of just saying anytime that you're eating, you're connecting it with an emotional experience, that's not fair, right? Because you could be stressed all day long, but your body is going to be actually physically hungry at times as well, right? So you're just putting guilt where guilt it shouldn't be, and it should just actually be physical, right? And it's going to make you feel a little hopeless if you're like, okay, things aren't quite working out right now. I feel like everything I eat is an emotional experience. It's just not true, right? So just know that you'll never be able to eat perfectly. You may have one day where you're like, my food logs are perfect. This is my calorie goal. My nutrient goal is met. And if every day was like this, it would just be so easy because I didn't feel hungry today. I just felt like it was a good day, right? But then the next day you're like famished, right? And then you just get so just caught up in the emotion of that, like, why can't this just be easy, right? That's totally normal. So we need to learn how to regulate our emotions a little bit. And if you are being more mindful of all of this stuff, that's going to be really help you. So let me give you a little bit of permission here, and talk a little bit about where eating is actually appropriate for weight loss and when you should be eating for real, because you do need food. You do need to actually be eating something. So the challenge with mindful eating is that if you're trying to be in a calorie deficit for weight loss, you're going to be feeling hungry, right? That's inevitable. And this is going to happen several times a day as you start experiencing these 3 to 4 hour intervals. So relying on that natural intuition may not be possible at this phase unless you're nearing your maintenance phase, which I know some of you are, because your body is still eating to maintain weight, and that is not something that is going to change. So restricting and ignoring hunger altogether is also a huge no-no. So it's important to find the sweet spot here between feeling a little bit hungry, but not ignoring altogether. So that's something that we work hard on in the program as well, and just finding the most filling eating patterns, and also finding foods that are emotionally satisfying as well, so they can enjoy them as they're entering this and they're making themselves more comfortable. But they don't feel starved. They don't feel pressured to keep within a specific calorie goal. You know, it's recognizing these things and kind of going with the flow. So generally speaking, if you can eat something every 3 to 4 hours and have like some designated meal and snack times, you know, with some wiggle room, obviously. But there's other times when it makes sense, right? So especially as you're kind of getting started with the weight loss process, you may not have found filling meals for yourself yet. And so if you're just eating like a healthy choice frozen meal, those things are like no calories whatsoever. It's basically air. And so if you are having a meal and you're immediately not satisfied and you know it wasn't filling enough, it's okay to eat again. We're going to talk about that 20-minute rule here that I have noted here in a minute too. But make sure that you've eliminated the emotional connection as well. So if you're saying like I'm feeling good today, that I'm fine, like there's nothing that's bothering me. Yeah, you may actually be physically hungry. It may be a very simple decision. Anytime you're actually hungry, and this hunger scale does come into play here as well, we don't want to be anything past a 3 ever. So if you are at a 3, 4, or a 5, and you've got that I could eat a cow sort of hunger going on, you've waited too long to eat, and most likely you're way past that 3 to 4 hour window. So if you're at like a 2, your stomach is grumbling, thinking about food, that is a pretty good time to at least start making plans for what you're going to be having. Because if you start making food decisions when you're at a 3, 4, or a 5, you're probably hitting the drive-through. You're going for carbs. You're going for that very simple, quick energy boost just to get something in your system. Okay. And then let's talk about this last one, this idea of missing an opportunity with food, right? If you are like taking a trip to France and you're trying to stay within a calorie goal and you don't have the croissant, please, when are you going to be back there to do those things? We need to keep these ideas in our head as well. Like, yes, within reason, we need to still be careful of how all this stuff is adding up. But if there is really a situation where you can never eat this type of food ever again, or you have the opportunity to go out with your friends and it's a social experience and all these other things, those are all valid reasons to at least be in the room. Okay. And experience it. That may be a matter of taking one bite and ordering something that's a little more in line with your plan and all of that. That's really a different topic. But I see so many people just sort of like internalize their diet and just push off any other sort of social interaction with people and saying, I can't have that. That's a bad food. Oh, I can't have any of that. It's a birthday party, but you don't have even a bite of the cake, like all of these little things, missed opportunities. And those are things that make it so difficult to stick to a diet because you become resentful of having missed out on all of these little things along the way. And at some point, you're going to be like, you know what? I just want to have those things. This is not worth it. So I'm just going to go back to the way that things were. Okay. So you have to allow these things into your diet along the way so that you are, first of all, figuring out how to fit these in, because there's really no reason you can't have these things on a weight loss diet. But long term, you have to think about sustainably how is it going to be once you've lost the weight, but you still can't have birthday cake. Like, that's not a life worth living, if you ask me. So missed opportunities, always an appropriate time to eat. Okay. Okay, so I want to leave you with some very practical tips here. We haven't really talked about anything you can do yet, so let's do that. So that way you can actually take some things home and start working on this now. So let's talk about when you can practice mindful eating. Another big pitfall with mindful eating is assuming that you can be doing this 100% of the time. That's just not possible. You can't sit and take a half an hour to eat every single meal every day of your life. Not going to happen. So really, whenever you can, and realistically, if you want to make the most of this, it's really pinpointing those times that you tend to mindlessly eat or tend to overeat and things that you feel like are problem areas, right? So after dinner snacking is a big one. Really, anytime that you want to snack, you want to really analyze the situation. If you're well past that 3 to 4 hour mark, it's a pretty clear answer. Yes, you should be eating. But maybe you just had lunch and all of a sudden you want a snack. So what is going on? Just being more mindful there. Anytime that the food choices and what is going into the food is not in your control when you're not cooking, great chance to be mindful. So let's say a friend invites you over for dinner. They're making who knows what, doesn't really matter. That is a time to be mindful, at least of the portions and whatever balance choices that you can make in those moments. And not to say that you need to sit there quietly and then like think about every bite that you're eating and ignore your friends. It could just be a matter of taking 30 seconds to say, okay, what is on my plate? What do I want to eat here? Like, what can I grab in here and make something balanced for myself? And then you can say, all right, I made a really good choice here. Now I can sort of mindlessly eat and socialize and do that thing without worrying about what's actually being consumed in those moments. And those are all things that, those come with time and practice and trial and error and a lot of those as well. Eating out, same thing. Even if you're just taking a few minutes to be mindful and choosing something off the menu that works for you initially. And then when it comes, you can make another choice and say, okay, is this too much though? Because, you can order a massive salad for 1,000 calories and still be doing well on a salad, right? So it's just thinking about at what points you tend to make the errors that cause you to overeat later. Those are really the times that being mindful, even just for short bursts of time, can be really helpful. Okay, so how do we do this? Back to how we do this, right? So the first thing is to stop. And if you were to fully complete a mindful eating meal, these are the directions you would have. And you'll see very simply why you can't do this every day, right? So if you're sitting down at a table to eat, that is going to be your best bet. So avoiding eating while you're driving. I'll occasionally be like eating something and walking around and gathering stuff for the day and all of that. And then eliminate any sort of distraction. So the only thing you're doing in that moment is looking at your food, eating your food, tasting it, enjoying it, all of that stuff. So anytime that you can eliminate distractions is really helpful. So, if you sit down in front of the TV for dinner, make a point to keep the TV off and just focus on that. Scrolling on the phone is another big one that a lot of people work with as well. So just being mindful of what your distractions are is helpful here. And then I like to set up, I say rule, but boundaries may be a better word on here too, just to allow yourself some sort of structure around this mindfulness, right? So maybe it's that you want to have a snack after dinner, especially, if you're eating at 5 o'clock and you're not going to bed till 10, you're breaking that 3 to 4 hour boundary, right? You're probably going to be hungry. So you can say, I'm going to have a snack, but I'm not going to do it in front of the TV because then I end up eating quite a bit more in those cases too. So this is where it gets kind of individual. And if you guys want to put in the chat, if there's, you can send it directly to me too. If there's like a time of day, like some sort of trigger, something specific that you're struggling with, I can give you some more specific examples too. Another really big one is portioning things out. Even when it comes to the single serve bags of certain snacks, some of that is just too much for the average person, right? So rather than sitting down with an entire bag of chips or an entire bag of popcorn and setting yourself up for eating way too much, you stay in the kitchen with the food, you plate it for yourself, grab yourself a cute little bowl, whatever it is that you like. I've had a lot of people in the past that have like one specific cute little ice cream bowl and a really cute spoon that they eat it with, and it becomes like a whole ritual when they have ice cream, but it's essentially just limiting their portion on it, but it's making it a little bit more enjoyable too. So having popcorn on movie night doesn't mean you're eating the whole thing. It could be having just your little bowl and you'll be just as satisfied because you're still having it, right? Snacking while driving is another big thing. If you have to do that, I've had a lot of clients over the years that actually travel for work and have to eat in the car. Portioning things out and just having like a little bag of trail mix that is pre-portioned, stuff like that. You can then kind of mindlessly eat as you're driving, but you have a stopping point, right? Because there's only so much in the bag. And then really anytime that you can't be mindful, grabbing something that is pre-portioned, whether you do that yourself or buy something that's packaged that way, can be really helpful in those moments too. Okay. Let's talk about this half rule. So there's two big rules that we talk about a lot in the program, and these are things that I use for myself too. So as you're introducing new meals, and if you are just getting started in weight loss, or this time around at least, anytime that you're plating something for yourself, choose to serve yourself half of what you would normally would, even if it feels like that there's no way that's going to be enough. That's okay. That's fine. The idea here is to create a natural stopping point for you to force mindfulness, right? So if there's only a tiny bit of food on your plate, you are then abruptly made aware of that fact by the fact that there's nothing left, right? And so then you can make a decision. Am I still hungry? Should I go back to get more or not, right? And this is a really great way to be mindful without being mindful in those situations too. So serve yourself half of what you can, with the idea that going back for seconds is absolutely fine, even thirds. So if you're normally serving yourself very little to begin with and you're doing half of that, yes, you may need to go back to thirds until you can kind of get a better idea of how much your body needs in those moments as well. So this is really just a good starting point for training yourself on portion sizes. And the best you can do is serve yourself away from the table. If everything, all the extra dishes are within arm's reach, it becomes a mindless decision just to refill. But if you have to go back to the kitchen in order to get the seconds, it's going to be more of a barrier for you to do that. So then how do we decide whether or not you're still hungry? So you served yourself half of the plate. Maybe you weren't super mindful while you were eating it. You ate kind of fast. how do you know if you should go back for seconds or not, right? It takes about 20 minutes for your stomach to signal your brain that you're full, right? And obviously, a lot of damage can be done during that time. So, a general rule is have your first serving, wait about 20 minutes before deciding on seconds. Is that realistic all the time? Absolutely not, right? But if you are trying to get a better understanding, even if you can do this at just at dinner when you know you have a little bit more leeway of time, it's going to help you better associate your own hunger signals everywhere during the day. So don't feel like you have to be doing this all the time, right? So, and remember too that being satisfied here and saying, okay, I need more or I don't need more has to be based on being in a calorie deficit decision too, right? So we know that your satisfaction when you're simply trying to maintain your weight may be at a little bit higher of a threshold than when you are in a calorie deficit. So this is like the biggest issue that we deal with in weight loss, right? It's how to be comfortable and how to recognize when you're weight loss satisfied versus maintenance satisfied. And that's going to be a very subjective thing. It plays into your emotions and all of these things as well. So that's why we use food logs in my program so that we can get a better idea of whether or not you're gauging that correctly, whether or not you're eating enough, where you stay very focused on those numbers to make sure that you are maintained and eating well, you're supporting your body in that. And then it helps you to then separate when you're feeling it more emotionally as well. So a lot more to that. There's always a ton more to that. But this 20-minute rule can really help you better gauge things. Because if after that, maybe that half plate serving that you're having was grossly less than what you were getting before, but it's actually an appropriate amount of food for you, then that 20 minutes has saved you from overeating and you're good, right? So that may be enough just to at least get the ball rolling for you if you're not tracking calories and all of that other stuff. So as I said before, it's really helpful for maintaining good portions and maintaining your weight, and that's wonderful. But once you get down to goal weight, working closely with mindful eating will be very helpful. But losing weight needs to be a little bit different. We're going to experience these early hunger signals more often during a weight loss effort, but we should never experience that extreme hunger, that irritability. So that's a really good sign that you're eating too little. Either that, or you can go an entire day without feeling anything. It's a pretty good idea that you're ignoring these early hunger signals as well. And it's pretty likely that you're going to be giving up on this venture altogether, because emotionally that can be very exhausting as well. So other things that you can do, filling up on less, right? So maybe you have identified this hunger source and, maybe it's only been an hour or two after you're eating. So rather than going for like seconds on a full meal here, maybe it's sort of pushing off the hunger a little bit, just giving yourself the next edge so that you feel comfortable getting to your next meal. Okay. Choosing just like fruit and veggie, having cut fruits and veggies around the house just to snack on. They still count. Obviously, there's still calories there in a lot of cases, but it's going to add up a lot slower, and it's probably going to fill you more than you think as well. So, adding these things in can be really helpful. Water, flavored seltzers, bubbly things tend to help to distract our digestive systems for a little bit of time as well. And sometimes it is more emotional, and it's finding an outlet for that. So rather than saying, all right, I'm feeling stressed, my natural inclination is to eat here, finding other ways to work through that stress, either dealing with the problem directly, finding something else to do. All of those things can be really helpful too. So if you guys need help with like alternative things for stress relief and emotion relief and all of that stuff, we can certainly talk about that as well. All right, back to more concrete stuff here. So setting yourself up for success is a big thing here, right? So you're going to eat, you're going to snack. And if you're doing that in a balanced way, weight loss should come pretty naturally. But the problem lies when we're making quick decisions. Like I mentioned before, if you are at that hunger level 3, 4, or 5, your ability to make a good decision declines the hungrier you get. Okay. So you're going to be going for that simple carb stuff, breads, sweets, heavy stuff, over portioned things. Your eyes are going to be bigger than your stomach. And so if you have yourself prepped, at least knowing what you're going to be making, maybe looking forward to those things, it's going to help you to execute those things, versus having no idea what you're supposed to be eating, feeling hungry. The chances of you making something healthy, pretty slim, right? So what I like to do is plan the week within reason. I think having a completely structured meal plan is really foolhardy in a lot of ways because it never quite goes to plan. So having some things ready, having those healthy snacks that we talked about. So maybe having 3 or 4 options just kind of planned out for the week, prepped and portioned out is going to be your best bet, depending on the amount of time you have. And just having all of that stuff ready to go. I'm also a very big fan of convenience foods for weight loss. So there are certain things that this idea of convenience is like super unhealthy in a lot of ways, but there are certain foods that are taking the prep work out of that, taking the time out of it, but are still nutritious and balanced options too. So I've actually got a list of those things I'll be sending you guys in your follow-up email after this too. But just thinking about the things that take you longest with meal prep, like cutting up veggies. Maybe it's cooking chicken. I try to cook chicken once a week and then use the leftovers for the rest of the week. I hate cooking chicken. So all of these things that are stopping points for you to cook something healthy, if you can find a convenience way around it, that is going to help you execute that much easier. I'm also a big fan of leftovers and bulk cooking so that you don't have to be cooking a whole lot. I probably only cook maybe 3 nights a week tops, just to keep it simple. So if you are someone that hates leftovers, sorry, you're going to have to cook more. That's just how that works. But setting yourself up for success, working on these plans, these are all things that we work on within my program as well. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of that because that can be very overwhelming as you're getting started. Okay, 2 more. Let's see. So other things for mining portions, reading labels, right? Just seeing what the manufacturer's suggested serving is really helpful. And if you are food logging, you're going to need to know that info anyway. So 2 birds, 1 stone. Always plating food away from the table. Always a good thing not to have that stuff mindlessly shoveled onto your plate. If you are eating out, again, it's just making a quick decision. When you're ordering on the menu, just taking, the minute to just be mindful before you're enjoying that social hour, so that you can make a good choice. Boxing up half the meal. Most times restaurant portions are 2 to 3 times what you actually need across the board. So it's a good thing to be taking home leftovers. Same thing with the takeout. If you're bringing food in, same thing goes. You don't want to be eating that whole portion. You want to make sure that there's going to be leftovers. And so that may mean changing the way that you order food as well. So not ordering a lot, knowing that you're going to be taking a lot more home too. Now, on the occasion that you do overeat, because it's going to happen, just try to do so without guilt, right? This is going to be something that you learn to get over time. It's still going to always be there, right? The problem with guilt is that it triggers more of the emotional response that is getting you where you are in the first place, right? So this really absolutely serves no purpose to feel guilty here. So what you can do, again, is applying some of these logical things we've been talking about to the situation so that you can plan better for next time. So you can do so rather than asking yourself the question, am I hungry before? You can say, was I hungry? Were you hungry in that situation? Maybe you can't tell, maybe you can. And identify that emotion again and giving it a name and, just kind of working backwards through that initial process. And just say, whether or not you took the time to ask yourself if you were hungry, recognize how you feel now physically. For a lot of us, that may mean feeling a little overstuffed, maybe even feeling a little bit sick in those occasions as well. And really what you can do is stop punishing yourself for overeating by restricting yourself for the rest of the day, because that just perpetuates that cycle, because then you're going to get too hungry again. You're going to have this famished feeling. You're more likely to overeat, and it sets you on this cycle that you cannot escape from. So plan to mindfully eat your next meal when you're actually feeling hungry at that next point. So you're feeling guilty about overeating, you're feeling really stuffed. Go ahead and plan out your next meal. What is that going to look like? Is there anything that you can prepare for that now? So when you are hungry, you have a very easy thing to say, okay, I'm hungry now. I'm going to have this. So having like a prep salad in there, getting some chicken together, whatever it is, make the decision to do better next time in that moment so that you're not perpetuating that cycle. And that is the best thing that you can do. Oh, last one, I promise. Okay, so I talked a little bit about the program that I have. I know I have a few of you that are in it, a couple past members as well here, so hello. So we do have a 12-week fully online program. It is based for on-demand learning, which is really great if your schedule's a little bit crazy. There are learning modules that you can do anywhere, anytime, but you're also working very closely with me on all those details that we were talking about. We do weekly check-ins for not only accountability, but to make sure that things are going smoothly for you, tweaking the plan as needed and all of that. We also do virtual one-on-one meetings monthly throughout that program as well. We do weekly live training calls with the whole group, and we have a Facebook group online as well. Okay. So I know we're just about out of time here, so we'll try to keep it short. So if you are interested in applying for this and learning a little bit more, what I want you to do is to book a complimentary discovery call. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit more about the program, some of the details, any questions that you have, you can certainly answer there. And we're going to talk about why you want to do this, right? So what goals you have, what aspirations you have, and understand where you may have gone wrong in the past and how doing this a different way may be an option for you too. I'm also a big proponent of making sure that the clients I work with feel like a good fit to work with as well. And so, you know, if it feels like the working relationship is not going to be great since we're working so closely together, that's why I do require this call to make sure that, you know, we're all on the same page. You know, that's going to get you the best outcomes at the end of 12 weeks as well. So that's about it for today. So if you do want to book your discovery call, I'll be sending out a link to do that in the email follow-up as well. But I do have a few more minutes. If you guys have any questions who are here live, I would be happy to take those. All good? Yeah, okay. All right. Okay, so we will go ahead and wrap up, but thank you guys for taking some time today to work through this. If you guys have any questions that come up, feel free to reach out to me via email or, like I said, on Facebook. But otherwise, have a great rest of your day, and we will talk soon. Bye, everybody.